The dust swirled around Thomas Mitchell's boots as he walked down the main street of Cedar Ridge, Arizona Territory, in the spring of 1874. Every eye in town followed him, every whisper cut deeper than the desert wind. They called him a fool, a traitor to his own kind, all because he had chosen love over the prejudice that poisoned their hearts. What they didn't know was that this choice would soon transform him from the town's outcast into something far greater than any of them could imagine. Thomas had arrived in Cedar Ridge 3 years earlier, a young blacksmith seeking a fresh start after the war. The town needed his skills, and he needed their business. It was a simple arrangement that worked well, until the day he met Ayanna at the trading post. She was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Her long black hair caught the sunlight like silk, and her dark eyes held intelligence and strength that commanded respect. When she spoke, her English was careful but clear, each word chosen with precision. She was Apache, daughter of a respected medicine man from the nearby Chiricahua Band. Most folks in Cedar Ridge saw the Apache as nothing more than obstacles to progress, threats to be eliminated or driven away. But Thomas saw Ayanna as she truly was, a remarkable woman with knowledge of the land that stretched back generations, someone who could read the sky like a book and find water where others saw only barren earth. Their courtship was conducted in secret at first. They would meet at dawn, near the old cottonwood by the creek, sharing stories of their different worlds. Ayanna taught him Apache words, showed him how to track animals by the smallest signs, and explained the delicate balance that kept the desert alive. Thomas shared his dreams of building something lasting, his skills with metal and fire, and his growing love for this woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about the frontier. When news of their relationship spread through town, the reaction was swift and brutal. Merchants refused to serve Thomas. Children threw stones at his shop windows. The local newspaper published editorials condemning his savage sympathies. Even Pastor Williams, who preached love and forgiveness every Sunday, warned Thomas that he was endangering his immortal soul. "You're making a mistake that will haunt you forever," Mayor Caldwell declared during a tense confrontation outside the general store. "That Apache witch has bewitched you. When her people come for your scalp, don't expect any help from decent folk." But Thomas had made his choice. On a crisp October morning, with only the justice of the peace and 2 reluctant witnesses present, Thomas Mitchell married Ayanna in a simple ceremony that scandalized the entire territory. The local newspaper headline read, "Local man commits social ending in unholy union." The months that followed tested their resolve. Thomas lost most of his business as customers took their work to the blacksmith in the next town. Ayanna faced constant stares and whispered insults whenever she accompanied him to town. Some of the more aggressive townspeople made it clear that she wasn't welcome in their establishments. Despite the hostility, their love only grew stronger. Ayanna proved to be not just a devoted wife, but a valuable partner. Her knowledge of local plants helped Thomas create new medicines that he sold to travelers. Her understanding of weather patterns allowed them to predict storms and droughts with uncanny accuracy. Slowly, a few of the more practical townspeople began to grudgingly admit that Thomas's Apache wife might have some useful knowledge. The real test came during the harsh winter of 1875. Snow fell heavier than anyone could remember, and supplies ran dangerously low. The railroad was blocked, and the usual supply wagons couldn't get through. Cedar Ridge found itself cut off from the outside world, with food stores dwindling and temperatures dropping to deadly levels. It was Ayanna who saved them, drawing on generations of Apache survival wisdom. She showed the townspeople how to find edible roots beneath the snow, how to construct more efficient heating systems using minimal wood, and how to preserve what little meat they had using traditional smoking techniques. Her knowledge turned what could have been a disaster into merely a difficult time. Even then, many in town remained stubborn in their prejudice. They accepted her help, but refused to acknowledge their debt to her. Thomas watched his wife save people who wouldn't even speak her name with respect, and his admiration for her strength grew daily. The situation changed dramatically in the spring of 1876, when reports reached Cedar Ridge of Apache raids on settlements to the south. Fear gripped the town like a fever. Families barricaded themselves in their homes. The territorial governor sent word that military protection was limited and towns would need to defend themselves. "It's her!" Mrs. Henderson screamed during an emergency town meeting. "She's been sending signals to her savage relatives. She's been planning this all along." The accusation absurd, but fear makes people believe absurd things. A mob formed outside Thomas's house, demanding that Ayanna be turned over to them. Thomas stood on his porch, rifle in hand, prepared to defend his wife against his own neighbors. "You want her. You'll have to go through me," he declared, his voice steady despite the odds. "But I guarantee you that would be the last mistake you ever make." The standoff might have turned deadly if not for the arrival of an unexpected party. A group of Apache riders approached the town, led by an elderly man whose bearing spoke of great authority. The townspeople scattered in terror, but Thomas recognized the lead rider. It was Nalnish, Ayanna's father. The medicine man dismounted slowly, his weathered face grave. Through Ayanna, who served as translator, he delivered a message that stunned everyone present. "My father says that the raids you fear are not from our band," Ayanna explained to the gathered crowd. "They come from a group of young warriors who have broken away from the traditional ways. These warriors attack anyone, Apache or white, who does not join their war. My father's people have also been threatened." Nalnish continued speaking, and Ayanna's translation grew more urgent. "He says that these rogue warriors plan to attack Cedar Ridge in 3 days. They know the town is weak and divided. They have been watching and waiting for the right moment." The revelation hit the townspeople like a physical blow. Their own prejudice and division had made them vulnerable to the very threat they feared most. Mayor Caldwell stepped forward, his face pale. What does he propose we do between us? "My father says there's only one way to survive his coming. The Apache white settlers must stand together. But for this to work, be trust. There must be a bridge between our people." The old medicine man approached Thomas directly, studying the young blacksmith with intense eyes. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of prophecy. "He says," Ayanna translated, her voice filled with wonder, "that Thomas has already proven himself worthy of by choosing love over hatred, by defending what is right against what is popular. He has shown the heart of a true leader." My father asks if Thomas will accept the responsibility of commanding the combined defense of this town. The request was unprecedented. No white man had ever been asked to lead Apache warriors. But as Thomas looked around at the faces of his neighbors, the same people who had mocked and shunned him, he saw something new, desperate. "Tell your father," Thomas said carefully, "that I am honored by his trust. But I am just a blacksmith. I know nothing of warfare or strategy." Nalnish smiled for the first time, and his response came through Ayanna with obvious pride. "My father says that a man who can shape iron into tools can shape chaos into order. He says that courage and wisdom matter more than experience in battle. He has watched you, Thomas Mitchell, and he believes you have both." The next 3 days transformed Cedar Ridge from a divided community into a unified fortress. Under Thomas's coordination, Apache knowledge merged with frontier practicality. The warriors showed the townspeople how to use the landscape for defensive advantage, while the settlers contributed their firearms and manufacturing skills. Ayanna proved invaluable as both translator and strategist. Her understanding of both cultures allowed her to bridge gaps that might have proven fatal. She helped establish communication systems, organized supply lines, and even taught some of the townspeople basic Apache tactics. The transformation in the people of Cedar Ridge was remarkable. Men who had refused to acknowledge Ayanna's existence now listened intently to her guidance. Women who had crossed the street to avoid her now worked alongside her to prepare defenses. Children who had once thrown stones now helped carry messages between the Apache and settler positions. Thomas found himself thrust into a role he had never imagined. Drawing on his experience organizing work crews at the smithy, he coordinated the efforts of over 200 people from 2 very different cultures. It was like forging a new kind of metal, heating different elements until they fused into something stronger than either could be alone. When the attack came, it was swift and brutal. 40 rogue warriors, armed and desperate, descended on Cedar Ridge expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they encountered a coordinated defense that used every advantage the desert terrain could provide. The battle raged from dawn until midday. Thomas found himself moving between positions, his commands translated instantly by Ayanna, coordinating rifle fire with traditional Apache arrows. The discipline and unity of the defenders proved superior to the savage desperation of the attackers. When the dust finally settled, the rogue warriors had been driven off with heavy losses. More important, not a single defender had been lost, and only 3 seriously wounded. The victory belonged to everyone, Apache and settler. But the greatest surprise came in the aftermath of the battle. As the defenders gathered to treat the wounded and assess the damage, more Apache riders appeared on the horizon. Not dozens this time, but hundreds. Nalnish had sent word to other bands throughout the region, telling them of the successful cooperation between his people and the whites of Cedar Ridge. Chiefs and sub-chiefs from across the Chiricahua Nation had come to see this miracle for themselves. What followed was unlike anything that had ever happened. In a ceremony that combined Apache tradition with frontier practicality, the assembled chiefs formally recognized Thomas Mitchell as a war leader worthy of their respect. They say, Ayanna translates, her voice thick with, that you have proven that a man's worth is not determined by the color of his skin or the place of his birth, but by the courage of his heart and the wisdom of his action. One by one, nearly 300 Apache warriors stepped forward to acknowledge Thomas as their war chief. It was not a political position. Thomas would never govern Apache lands or make decisions for Apache people, but it was recognition of something far more valuable, respect of warriors who valued courage above all else. The ceremony concluded with Nalnish placing a traditional war bonnet on Thomas's head, its eagle feathers catching the setting sun. My father says that this bonnet has been worn by chiefs who led 10,000 warriors into battle. He says you have earned the right to wear it, not by conquest, but by proving that peace requires more courage than war. The transformation in Cedar Ridge was permanent. Successful defense and the Apache recognition of Thomas created a new model for frontier life. The town became a trading center where Apache and white merchants conducted business with mutual respect. Ayanna's medical knowledge, combined with traditional frontier medicine, made Cedar Ridge a destination, people seeking healing across the territory. Thomas continued his work as a blacksmith, but now his shop served both communities. He created tools that combined efficiency with frontier durability. His reputation spread throughout the Southwest as both a skilled craftsman and a man who could be trusted by people of all backgrounds. The newspaper that had once condemned his marriage now celebrated the miracle of Cedar Ridge. Territorial officials pointed to the town as an example of successful cooperation between settlers and native people. Thomas found himself invited to address territorial assemblies, even congressional committees in Washington. But the greatest reward was the quiet satisfaction he found in his daily life. Every evening, as he and Ayanna sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert sky in brilliant colors, he marveled at how love had transformed not just his own life, but an entire community. The children of Cedar Ridge grew up learning both English and Apache, understanding that wisdom could come from many sources. The merchants who had once refused to serve Thomas now competed for his business. The pastor who had warned him about endangering his soul now regularly invited both Thomas and Ayanna to speak to his congregation about the power of love to overcome hatred. Years later, when historians wrote about the successful integration of Apache and settler communities in the Southwest, they would point to the marriage of Thomas Mitchell and Ayanna, the catalyst that changed everything. But for Thomas himself, the greatest victory was simpler. He had chosen love over prejudice, hope over fear, and in doing so he had discovered that courage is not the absence of doubt, but the determination to do what is spite them. The town that had once mocked him for marrying an Apache had learned that true strength comes not from division, from unity. As Thomas looked out over the thriving community that Cedar Ridge had become, with Apache and white children playing together in the streets, with merchants of all backgrounds conducting honest business, with families of different cultures sharing meals and celebrations, he knew that the real victory had been won not on the day 300 warriors crowned him chief, but on the day he decided that love was stronger than hate. The desert wind still swept through the streets of Cedar Ridge, but now it carried the sounds of laughter and cooperation instead of whispers of fear and prejudice. And at the heart of it all stood a simple blacksmith and his Apache wife, living proof that one man's courage to follow his heart could change the world around him. The story of Thomas Mitchell became legend throughout the Southwest, inspiring other communities to seek peaceful coexistence with their Apache neighbors. Territorial officials regularly sent delegations to study the Cedar Ridge model, and Thomas found himself corresponding with government leaders as far away as Washington about policies regarding Native people. But the man himself remained humble. When young people came to him seeking advice about overcoming prejudice or following their dreams despite opposition, he would simply point to his wife and say, "Love is the strongest force in the universe. Everything else is just..." As the years passed, Thomas and Ayanna raised 3 children who grew up bilingual and bicultural, comfortable in both the Apache and settler worlds. Their eldest son, James, became a respected translator and mediator who helped establish similar cooperative communities throughout Arizona Territory. Their daughter, Maria, combined her mother's traditional healing knowledge with formal medical training to become the region's most sought-after physician. Their youngest, David, followed his father into blacksmithing, but specialized in creating tools that helped both cultures work the challenging desert landscape more effectively. The success of their family became another powerful argument for the wisdom of cross-cultural marriages. When critics from outside the territory would visit and express shock at the mixing of bloodlines, the residents of Cedar Ridge would simply point to the Mitchell children, intelligent, capable, and perfectly adapted to their environment. Thomas's reputation as a leader extended far beyond military matters. When disputes arose between Apache bands and settler communities throughout the Southwest, both sides often requested that Thomas Mitchell serve as mediator. His unique position as a white man respected by Apache leaders gave him credibility that no government official could match. In 1882, when Geronimo's final campaign brought federal troops back to Arizona Territory in force, Thomas played a crucial role in preventing the conflict from spreading to the peaceful communities that had adopted the Cedar Ridge model. His personal intervention helped convince several Apache leaders to remain neutral rather than join Geronimo's resistance. The territorial newspaper that had once condemned his marriage eventually published a series of articles celebrating the 25th anniversary of Thomas and Ayanna's wedding. The headline read, "The Marriage That Changed the Southwest, How Love Conquered Hate in the Desert." And in the quiet moments of evening, when the work was done and the town settled into peaceful sleep, Thomas would take Ayanna's hand and remember the day she had first smiled at him by the trading post. He had never imagined that choosing love could lead to such extraordinary consequences. But then again, the greatest adventures always begin with the simplest, and sometimes the courage to love someone different from yourself is all it takes to change not just your own world, but the world around you forever. As Thomas entered his 70th year, he would often sit on his porch in the evenings, watching the children of Cedar Ridge, Apache, Mexican, and Anglo, playing together in the dusty streets. The sight never failed to fill him with wonder. 3 generations had grown up knowing that difference was not something to fear, but something to celebrate. When travelers would ask him about the secret to creating such harmony between different peoples, Thomas would always give the same answer. There's no secret to it. You just have to decide that love is stronger than fear, and then live like everything else follows naturally. And as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Thomas Mitchell, blacksmith, war chief, peacemaker, and husband, would squeeze his wife's hand and smile, knowing that their love story had become something far greater than either of them had ever dreamed possible. It had become proof that in a world often divided by hatred and suspicion, love truly could conquer all.